Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a massive philosophical earthquake that completely rewrote the rules of 20th century philosophy. You see, for decades, there was a really strict set of academic rules dictating what counted as a rational belief and what was just instantly dismissed as total nonsense. Well, today, we're diving into how a groundbreaking concept known as reformed epistemology challenged every single one of those rules and fundamentally redefined how we understand the rationality of belief. It's a fascinating detective story, so let's get right into it.
Here's our roadmap for the explainer. 1. The rise of skepticism. 2. Plantinga changes the rules. 3. What is properly basic? 4. Flaws of classical foundationalism. 5. God and other minds. And finally, 6. The Great Pumpkin Objection.
Section 1. The rise of skepticism. The demand for proof. To really understand this huge philosophical shift, we have to look back at the growing momentum of religious skepticism in the early 20th century. It kind of all kicked off around 1917 with a highly influential group called the Vienna Circle. Their influence just snowballed over the decades, leading to prominent thinkers like Anthony Flew in the 1950s arguing for a strict presumption of atheism. Basically, the burden of proof was entirely on the believer. Prove God exists, or atheism is the default. And by May of 1966, this skepticism had become so incredibly mainstream that Time magazine ran its famous, stark cover asking, "Is God dead?" At that point, religious belief was largely viewed by the academic elite as something humanity had simply outgrown.
The real engine powering all of this skepticism was something called logical positivism. This was a movement actively trying to drag philosophy down to a strictly scientific, testable earth. The philosophers in the Vienna Circle absolutely hated the high-minded, unprovable theories of the 19th century. They wanted philosophy to be practical, respectable. So they came up with the verification principle. They boldly declared that for literally any statement or belief to even be considered meaningful, it had to be verifiable through empirical confirmation. If you couldn't prove it in a lab or with hard scientific data, boom, it was considered literally meaningless. This meant beliefs about morality, about beauty, and absolutely about God were just tossed completely out the window.
But here's the ultimate irony of logical positivism, which critics eventually pointed out. Its core rule completely fails its own scientific test. Seriously, think about it for a second. The rule states, any belief is only justifiable if it can be empirically proven. But wait, can you scientifically test or empirically prove that specific rule? No way. You cannot put the verification principle in a test tube. Critics rightly argued that it fails its own standard. According to its own logic, logical positivism is cognitively meaningless. Now, even though it took decades for this glaring contradiction to be fully recognized, its skeptical mindset heavily influenced generations of college students and scholars.
Section 2. Plantinga changes the rules. A new perspective.
Right at the absolute peak of this academic skepticism, philosopher Alvin Plantinga steps up and decides to flip the entire script. Working at the exact same time that Time magazine was declaring the death of God in 1966, Plantinga starts developing an argument that didn't just offer new evidence for God. No, he challenged the very rules of what makes a belief rational in the first place. He looked at this default presumption of atheism and this intense demand for scientific proof, and he asked a radical question. Do you actually need evidence to justify your belief in order for it to be rationally respectable? This inquiry led directly to his groundbreaking book, God and Other Minds, and eventually to a massive 3-volume work known as the Warrant Trilogy.
So here is Plantinga's daring conclusion, and it was a real game changer at the time. The religious believer does not actually need evidential justifications to fulfill their intellectual obligations. Plantinga argued that traditional arguments for the existence of God, stuff we call natural theology, they definitely have their limits. Instead of constantly playing defense and trying to meet the impossibly strict demands of the logical positivists, Plantinga argued that the believer is perfectly within their intellectual rights to assume from the very outset that God exists.
Moving to Section 3. What is properly basic? The foundation of knowledge.
To pull off this argument, Plantinga introduced the idea that belief in God is what he calls properly basic. That means it's a starting point deeply grounded in experience, not a conclusion you piece together from other proofs. Think of it like a foundation. A properly basic belief doesn't just randomly pop into your head out of nowhere willy-nilly. It's triggered and grounded by our everyday human experiences. But the absolute key here is that it is not inferred from other beliefs. You don't deduce it through some complex mathematical formula. You just know it.
And to put that in perspective, think about this. We perfectly, rationally hold dozens of massive assumptions every single day that we absolutely cannot prove. You believe physical objects still exist when you turn your back on them, right? You believe the world is older than 5 minutes, meaning it wasn't just created 5 minutes ago with built-in fossils and fake memories somehow implanted in your brain. You believe you had breakfast this morning based purely on your memory. You'd be considered completely irrational if you didn't believe these things, and yet you cannot scientifically, definitively prove a single one of them. You hold them as basic.
Section 4. Flaws of classical foundationalism. Failing the test. Plantinga took a hard look at the dominant theory of knowledge at the time, which was classical foundationalism. This theory demanded incredibly strict criteria for what could be considered a foundational belief. It basically stated, sure, we all have a foundation of basic beliefs, but to be considered a properly basic belief, it has to meet one of 3 totally impossible standards. It had to be self-evident, it had to be evident to the senses, or it had to be logically incorrigible, meaning it was absolutely impossible for it to be false. If a belief didn't meet these super strict criteria, the classical foundationalists said you had absolutely no right to use it as a foundation for your knowledge.
But here we go with another hilarious intellectual own goal. Plantinga pointed out that classical foundationalism suffers from the exact same problem as logical positivism. It completely fails its own impossibly high standard. He noted that the very rule of classical foundationalism, the demand that a belief must be self-evident or incorrigible, is itself not self-evident, not evident to the senses, and certainly not logically incorrigible. It fails its own test. With this absolutely decisive critique, Plantinga showed that we actually need a much more generous, realistic view of what counts as a foundational, properly basic belief.
Section 5. God and Other Minds, an Intuitive Parallel.
To really ground his theory, Plantinga offered a super powerful analogy. Every single day, you interact with other human beings and naturally assume there is a rich, conscious mind behind their face, right? Well, can you scientifically prove it? Actually, no. The best arguments for the existence of other minds are surprisingly weak, and yet it is entirely rational to believe it in a properly basic way. By analogy, Plantinga argues, God is simply the infinite mind behind the cosmos. Just as you are justified in assuming other human minds exist based on your everyday experiences, you are well within your intellectual rights to start with the belief in a cosmic mind based on your experience of the world.
He draws heavily on theological history here, noting that human beings possess an innate, experiential awareness that naturally points toward a creator. In fact, Plantinga borrows a concept from the reformer John Calvin called the sensus divinitatis, which translates to a natural sense of the divine. This, by the way, is exactly where the term Reformed epistemology comes from. The theory suggests we are essentially hardwired with cognitive faculties that, when functioning properly, naturally result in a belief in God. Now, the Reformed aspect also acknowledges that human flaws or sin can damage this cognitive function, requiring a sort of cognitive redemption to restore our natural orientation toward the divine. But the core idea is that this awareness, it's just built in.
Section 6. The Great Pumpkin Objection. Handling the pushback.
Naturally, critics push back hard on this. They launched what famously became known as the Great Pumpkin Objection. They basically argue that if Plantinga relaxes the rules for what is properly basic, he is opening the floodgates to completely irresponsible, absurd beliefs. Referencing the classic Peanuts cartoon, they asked, "Hold on, if you don't need proof for God, can I say my belief in the Great Pumpkin who bestows gifts on children is properly basic? Can literally anyone just believe anything they want now?"
Plantinga very calmly countered that while humanity definitely has a built-in cognitive inclination toward the divine, we don't exactly have an innate compass pointing us toward cartoon gourds. He pointed out that just because it's difficult to draw a perfect mathematical line for what constitutes a properly basic belief doesn't mean that anything goes. There is a monumental difference between a concept like the Great Pumpkin, which is a known comedic invention, and the concept of a divine creator, which actually aligns with that sensus divinitatis, that natural tendency deeply embedded in the human experience.
And this innate tendency explains a lot. It explains why over 90% of the human population currently believes, and historically has believed, in some form of higher power. Whatever names or traditions this higher power goes by across different cultures, this overwhelming statistical reality really points back to our natural cognitive inclination. I mean, we simply do not see 90% of humanity naturally developing a belief in the Great Pumpkin across isolated cultures and centuries. This massive, widespread human experience heavily supports the idea that belief in a higher mind is a properly basic function of human cognition.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this really provocative thought regarding the very foundation of how we know what we know. Reformed epistemology didn't just defend religious belief. It really forced the academic world to look in the mirror and realize that our everyday sanity relies on countless unprovable assumptions. From trusting our memories to believing the people around us actually have thoughts and feelings, we rely on properly basic beliefs every single second of the day. If we accept those without scientific proof, it opens up a whole new world of what it truly means to be a rational thinker. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this fascinating shift in philosophy. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.